2nd, 2015 Halifax Elementary School Committee meeting. We are starting this evening with a public budget hearing, so I need a motion to go into the public budget hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, does anybody have any comments or questions regarding the 2015-2016 budget? Okay, well then, seeing none. Is there a motion to close the public budget hearing?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
That was easy.
All right, onward with our agenda. Acknowledge and schedule of visitors. Does anybody wish to be acknowledged or scheduled? Mr. Reese.
Steve Ruisi, Halifax Teachers Association. Thank you, committee, for the opportunity to speak tonight. If I could ask my colleagues just to please stand up. The purpose of the Halifax Teachers Association statement tonight is just to update the school committee and the community on the changes made to Phase 2 action and also an update on contract negotiations. Real quickly, after working alongside the superintendent's office and receiving clarification from our council, all school day activities in Phase 2 that were listed in our Phase 2 action plan during the school day have now been removed from that action plan and they have now been implemented back into our school year. These changes were made on February 12th, resulting in the performances of 4th grade stomp and 5th and 6th grade volleyball. Both of those events took place on Friday, February 13th. Other school day activities that will be back on track include 5th grade stomp, the turkey trot, study island, fitness awards, and field day. So those are all events that happen between 8 and 3:08, and those are back on track. So that's our change to Phase 2 action. All other aspects of Phase 2 remain in place at this time. Update on the position of the HTA in contract negotiations. I'd just like to start really by saying first we're entering an extremely important time of the school year. We all know it. Assessments are coming, the school budget is underway, the town budget's being shaped. In the end of the school year, after 6 straight days of school, we'll get close to the end. Okay, 75 days to go, but it's coming quick. So it is an important part of the school year for us. And we all want to focus our energy in the right place. Therefore, the time is now for us to reach an agreement with our contract. Halifax Teachers Association met with your negotiating team on February 12th and had a healthy discussion. A lot of concerns were talked about and the meeting was productive. As a result of our negotiating team, we took the initiative to design a proposal to move this process forward. Okay, we submitted a proposal that spends to the town's request. I would like to repeat that. We submitted a proposal that spends to the town's request. And last week we allowed your committee and the advisors and your advisors a chance to evaluate it and ensure its value. We encourage you to work with us on any questions or concerns so that we can reach an agreement quickly, so that this process does not draw out another month. We really can't afford to keep going this way. And in closing, during these negotiations, we have moved our position all the way to you. We have done our part. Your school committee's negotiating team is doing their part. And it's time for the committee as a whole to do its part. Let's get a deal done. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. If I could politely just ask the committee, for those that need to leave the meeting due to their family responsibilities, the opportunity to have them do that.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to be acknowledged or scheduled? Okay. Review and approve minutes of February 2nd, 2015 and February 24th, 2015.
And my correction, I think that's February.
February 5th, sorry.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Separate that down.
Okay. I would like to ask administration if we could get the, both sets of minutes up as soon as possible, because we did have a very lengthy budget discussion where we went line by line on the 24th. Unfortunately, we didn't have a camera, so that anybody wishing to see that discussion could have access to those minutes. All right, approval of bill schedule, signing of warrants.
They're circulating at the moment?
They are circulating, and we have 6 regular warrants, and then we have the 2 school warrants. The regular warrants, grand total of $267,304.82. School committee correspondence and reports. Yes, is there a problem? They're not on my agenda. Can we put them on the agenda for next month? Thank you. Request from Zoning Board of Appeals for input on Black Ledge Farm project. I am going to read the request that was in the school committee mailbox. It says petition number 826, application for Chapter 40B comprehensive permit project. The project is Black Ledge Farm, land off of Franklin Street in Halifax, Mass. The developer is Boker LLC, Robert Richard Lincoln Jr. manager. And it says, enclosed, please find a copy of the official filing of a comprehensive permit application for a 40B project named Black Ledge Farm, petition number 826. As stated in the cover letter, Black Ledge Farm, located between 243 and 229 Franklin Street, Halifax, proposes to build 52 single-family homes on 32 acres of upland, 62 acres total, or a density of 1.6 homes per upland area. The Zoning Board of Appeals, i.e. the board, would like to invite the participation of each department, board, or committee as it is deemed necessary and helpful in making its decision upon such application. The board would like to ask for the following. Designate a liaison to represent the department, board, and/or committee, and communicate the designee information to the Office of the Zoning Board of Appeals via email to mwongryan@town.halifax.mat.us. This would enable the board to ensure the flow of back-and-forth communications be dispensed accordingly. Review the application and submit written comments, preferably by the date of the initial public hearing. If this request is unattainable, please advise when one can be made available. If there are no comments, the board would still appreciate a reply stating such, in order to assure each department, board, and/or committee has communicated. The board would like to remind each department, board, and/or committee that Chapter 40B comprehensive permit projects are under performance requirement deadlines, and as such, your attention feedback to this project would be appreciated. The board is looking forward to working closely with the department, board, and/or committee. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. I did forward you all the electronic version of the packet. The hard copy is here at the school. Is there anyone willing to volunteer to be the liaison?
I have a question about this, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm not entirely sure I understand why the school committee would be involved in a zoning issue. Is there any precedent for this?
Mrs. Roy, if you could.
I think that perhaps they would like your input on impact of quite a project for students coming in.
Has that ever been asked to the school committee before, do you
This
know?
is our first official 40B that's made it to this point, so I think we're all sort of trying to navigate this first.
I know I personally would like to see the impact report. Given where we are right now with enrollments, it could mean a big deal going forward. And given where the town is for its budget, it makes me wary.
Me too.
So I think it's important that we do participate and have a voice in this process. One of the requests was not to have the reports, the impact reports done until the project was approved, and that makes me nervous.
That doesn't make any sense.
But that's why, but that's what the company is requesting.
I don't know that there's much, I think it's on the track of being approved. I don't know that there's a lot. You know,
Right. We don't have a lot of say in,
Yeah, and
But-
again, we're all navigating. We took we had a seminar a couple months ago I attended because I'm sort of new at this too. And I believe the hearing is March 11th. Is that the
March 16th.
Yeah.
Kim, do you know currently what percentage of affordable housing we have?
Okay, so we don't have a lot, but there's a lot of our community that we can't count. For instance, the mobile home park
I
cannot be
understand.
counted toward it.
That's a big problem throughout the
There you
state.
go. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? We have an expert right here.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. I'm sorry?
0.7?
You said 7?
0.7.
0.7. Needs 10%, right?
The state of Massachusetts requires each town to have
10%,
10%
yes.
affordable housing for the projects in the town. Rounding up gets to 1%.
Well, that's a whole other discussion that we don't have time for
Yeah.
tonight, but thank you, I appreciate your response.
So is anybody willing to volunteer to be the liaison?
I'll do it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Would you like me to email you that information? Okay. All right, and does the committee have any questions, concerns that they would like to put forward to the Zoning Board of Appeals at this time?
Let's see the impact report first.
So we'd all like to request the impact report?
Yeah, I'd like to also know specifically what is the family population. We have 52 single-family homes. Is that 2 parents, 2 children? Is that?
I don't think they know that until they...
I don't think there's any way of knowing that yet.
Going through the packet, there is, it's mostly 3 and 4 bedroom homes that they're proposing. If I remember this off the top of my head, 14 were going to be low income? 13? It could have a huge impact on our elementary system. So I really, while I understand that town doesn't have a lot of options, I think the impact report would be helpful for us as a committee in planning the future.
Agreed.
This project is going to potentially increase our population of student as well as expenditure.
Mhm.
Moreover, and I don't really think anything that we would be able to predict would really be based on anything else for the next 5 or so years.
Unfortunately, Kim is right. If my understanding of the law, if we don't have 10%, then basically developers, 40B developers can circumvent local zoning laws, and they don't count mobile homes. I know that's been a big issue in a lot of communities, because if they did include them, then the percentage would, I don't have no idea if we did count where our percentage would be, but I know in a lot of communities that's been a big issue, but they keep running into a brick wall at the legislation level, so.
Yeah, so we had a very similar project. It was Black Ledge a few years ago when it came before us, and it was sort of right before the economy started to turn, which sort of helped us out at the time, because certainly you get some revenue from in tax base, but when you have families moving in with children, it costs more to educate the children than the income that's coming in. And we don't want to turn people away, but that's the reality. And we had some issues at the time about the right of egress for the fire trucks and all that stuff. So we're still sort of working those things out. So those are the particulars that you can sort of look at and say, this doesn't work in our community for this reason. But I think that they're looking for different ways to get to work that out. But it's definitely more of a reality than it was several years ago, because the economy is bouncing back. And so there is a market for first-time homeowners.
Do we know what the build-out plan is? How many homes they plan to build per year, or?
Mary, would
Is there a phase? Are they proposing a phase? At this point in time, no. There's no phase, like phasing the project. at this point. Right now, they're proposing it, the deadline to, for the board to decide, to make a decision is 180 days. So basically September, unless the developer agrees to the mutual extension. And then we'll see how it goes. Initially, they came up in 2007, 2008 for approximately 120 condominiums, and the board was able to negotiate down to about 97. But after some hiccups, they withdrew without prejudice and attempted several times to come before the town with different projects, of which case, again, withdrawn without prejudice, and now they went back to the state, to Mass Housing, for a 40B project.
So Marion also works for the zoning board of appeals, which is why she's the expert in this particular
Mhm.
area right now. A lot of us hold these dual roles. Right?
Mr. Superintendent,
Yes, ma'am.
do you have any recommendations for us? Have you been through this before in any of our towns?
I have. We've done this in Kingston on a couple of occasions in large-scale developments. We've been, the school committee and administration's been asked to look at the plans and comment on them. I would think that one of the things that you're going to look at is the impact report and decide whether it seems reasonable or not. I'm not suggesting that what they're going to give you is not unreasonable, but you know, what assumptions go into it, and based upon that, it helps as a planning tool for the schools to say, gee, what are we apt to see in terms of people moving into town? To Derek's question, what's the demographics? What do they expect to see? Will we see families moving in with, as newlyweds with no children, and we'll have 5 or 6 years to prepare for them? Or are they apt to be people moving here having already owned a condominium, started a family, and now they're moving here with somebody who is in 2nd, 3rd grade? Of course, that's going to make a difference. So those are the kinds of things you look at. What assumptions are they making, and what assumptions seem reasonable to you? Been through it several times in Kingston.
Okay.
And I will say that I think every time that we have been given information, the impact has always been done by, not by the developer, but it's always been a reputable planning firm, and frankly, the numbers always seem to come out to be pretty reasonable.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? Comments? All right.
She's taking a class and will be here as soon as she's completed for a presentation.
Okay, so I am going to ask the committee that we hold off on the next item on the agenda for the presentation on sped placement. Our sped director is taking a class and will be here as soon as she can. And we will take her at a later time. Is that all right with everyone? Yep, okay. So, on to unfinished business, Building and Safety Subcommittee. Mr. Tuffy had updated the committee last month that it is okay to form this type of committee. Whether we want to go forward with it, or what do we want to do? Derek, would you like to speak to it?
I feel as I've spoke a lot on it, and I will gladly speak again. The purpose and focus with this would be to identify any issues or concerns that would be of a priority, and work with the building, specifically the administration, the faculty, and in particular the maintenance and school nurse in addressing any issues pertaining to building safety, as well as any concerns or issues of building quality. Within that category would be things such as virus or such, to better prepare and work sort of in sync with everyone, so that we're not trying to do too many things at once and not enough people in the loop.
we as a whole, like, are we as a whole responsible for that, like, as a whole body at the time? I'm just trying to understand the difference between our responsibilities as they are now, or would it be something that would be, like, a smaller subcommittee that would report back to the whole board?
Yes, that would be the idea of be working.
Because I'm assuming at the moment, it all just gets relayed back to you as the chair? Like
Well, it
anything that
gets-
may, any issue that may
Anyone
be, but then it's distributed further.
Yeah, so when we had the pipe burst,
Yeah, exactly.
I get a phone call, just to let you know this is happening. Okay, and then I get to say, okay, this needs to go out to the full committee, or, you know, okay, we have a meeting in a couple of days, we can do it then. And it really, so, but it's not just that, it's, you know, the whole building maintenance,
Yeah.
somebody to sit down and talk to administration rather than, you know,
So who's that person now? You,
no, it's the committee.
as a
Yes.
whole?
So you're
So
see-
do you think if that, sorry, do you think if that responsibility was delegated to an individual or two, and then it would be more productive?
Do I think that?
Yeah.
Yes.
As a chair, I'm asking.
Yes, I do. I actually, you know, as building needs come up, to have, you know, somebody sit down and talk with not just Claudia, but maybe the superintendent and the head custodian, and see what, you know, what the needs are, discuss what the needs are, and bring the priorities back. I guess is the way I'm envisioning it. When we have different outbreaks that go through the school, you know, viruses are coming, flu season, different stuff like that, you know, somebody to sit down and say, okay, this is what's going on. You know, we do it at wellness for some things, but not at a building level. We talk about what's going on district-wide, so. And I think that if we create that subcommittee, it's that subcommittee that can really work on putting together that capital plan that needs to be put together and go forward, rather than us, all of us sitting here.
Yeah.
It's more productive, I think, at a subcommittee level, than to take,
I kind of feel like, too, just myself personally, that I don't really have a good grasp of what's going on in the building, like as far as the condition of the roof, or when there was the issue with the bathroom stalls and things like that, because as a body, we're sort of not, we're all taking a little bit, instead of somebody really sitting down and saying, walk me through the school and tell me what's wrong.
exactly.
And at sometimes, we're all taking the same bit at the same
Yeah.
time and avoiding something else. It's just the nature of a committee.
So I think the subcommittee would be more productive.
Okay. I'm open to the idea, I like it. What do you think?
I think I might volunteer.
All right.
Thank you, Mrs. Laird.
No, I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
So is there a motion to create a building and safety subcommittee?
So maybe.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, now that the committee has created the subcommittee, we need members for the subcommittee. Is anybody willing to volunteer?
Well, I think I just walked right into that one.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
The duration, I will be the alternate.
Do we want a one-member subcommittee or do we want a two-member subcommittee? I'm thinking two. So you're gonna do it for the duration of your term?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Johnson and Mr. Bennett will be our subcommittee members. Now it's up to you guys to talk about and schedule your first meeting. Let me know when you do that, and I will get it posted and make sure you talk to administration. Okay, excellent.
We shall have a phone call from me possibly tomorrow morning.
All right.
be looking forward.
So energy efficiency projects, I'd asked Charlie to come talk to us. Charlie is going to be over at 8. I was not sure how to schedule this because of the public budget hearing and stuff. So I'm going to ask that we take Charlie at 8 o'clock. New business? I didn't hear of any. So report of standing committees, Halifax subcommittees, policy. No updates. I'm sure MASC will be putting out some kind of letter either next month or early May, as is their norm. Negotiations.
As Mr. Ruiz noted, we met February 12th, I believe it was. And I felt also it was a productive meeting. We don't currently have another meeting scheduled, but we will be addressing that at some point.
And we will be going
Into executive session.
Okay. Pilgrim Area Collaborative. This is an update on the February 5th meeting. As you all know, I was unable to attend the meeting as we had a school committee meeting that evening. The director updated the board with her goals, and the board voted to accept her goals for the 2014-2015 school year. The evaluation document for the treasurer was passed out, and it was asked that it be returned to the chair by February 27th. Dr. Gahan informed the board that Plymouth and Duxbury wanted to increase the rent for the classroom space in the host school buildings. And she explained that districts could not increase the rent as it was a board decision. Comparative data was provided showing what other collaboratives were paying host schools for rent, and the budget subcommittee will consider the issue. And our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, March 5th, which I will be able to attend. Liaison Youth and Rec.
These years I feel like I'm doing a sports report. Nevertheless, spoke with Dick Steele. 17th annual Easter egg hunt coming up Saturday, April 4th, between 11 and 1. Hope and pray that they'll be green rather than white. Also, we'll have, as part, we'll have face painting, moonwalk, balloonist, a guess how many jelly beans in a jar, photos with the Easter rabbit, and frozen characters, coffee and donuts for the parents. The after-school sports program is currently running in session 5, which will end on March 12th. Session 6 to begin on March 17th. It should be noted that session 4 was extended through to January 6th due to the weather situation that we are undergoing. Silver Lake Future Stars Basketball Clinic completed its third and final session at the end of February the 8th. And again, thanks to all those who have participated and volunteered. Upcoming events include the 7th grade Washington, D.C. trip, the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade dances are scheduled but have not been posted at this time. Please check the website if you have any questions on that. And that's where that went.
Thank you. PTO.
I think you just did my report. However, we did talk about a couple of other things. Claudia and I answered questions as best we could about the status of the budget, how the town has a deficit, etc. But then we talked about the George H. Mitchell Elementary School that I'm sure everyone here is aware of. And we talked about the idea of possibly, if we have any to spare, donating some excess supplies to that school. Are we prepared to?
I can actually address some of that right now. We have been in contact with the Bridgewater School. They are currently flooded with wonderful donations, and they're trying to sort out specifically what the teachers need. So after speaking with them today, what they'd really like to do is first and foremost offer a thank you for the generous outpouring of support that everyone has been reaching out to do. And secondly, they'll be calling me later this week to give me a sense as to what the teachers specifically need. Working with Mrs. Laws and the PTO, we should be able to, at that point, gather a list, see specifics as to what the teachers are looking for, and then have that conversation as to what they specifically need.
Well, we could do a motion to leave it up to you to use your discretion to do it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we'll have to wait till next month.
Okay.
So what's your pleasure?
Well, certainly if you could, put together a motion, that would be great.
Okay.
And any excess materials that we may have, be it some workbooks that teachers may not be using that may be, out of date, or, or some paper that we currently are not using. Certainly, I think that if that's something that they need, that would be helpful.
Okay, I'll make a general motion then that we allow Claudia to use her discretion to gather up surplus materials to donate to the town of Bridgewater.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Anything else for the PTO?
That was it.
Okay. Capital budget.
Yes, this week I sent over request for following material to capital budget. 7,800 for 2 projectors to be placed in the kindergarten. 5,800 for 2 network switches. 3,000 for 1 drive array for storage purposes. 2,400 for replacement printers. 11,000 for a Chromebook cart apparatus, and 2 administrative laptops at 1,600.
Okay.
I have a question about that.
Yep.
So are we done discussing this as a board? Okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
Actually, I think that we may want to make some modifications to that. We've had a process over the last several years of the town sponsoring a separate technology article for some of those items. And I think that most of those items would probably fit better in that category if the committee's pleasure was to pursue it, and if the town was still agreeable to sponsoring a technology article.
Yeah, I think I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago about receiving the capital plan, because when we met with Steve, was Steve we met with last year?
Steve Pellet.
Yes. So he came up with sort of a 3 to 5 year capital plan of different things that you were earmarking to purchase based
And I
on
think-
the needs of the teachers, classroom, math lab, all those kinds of things. And so we were waiting to receive that second phase, or the modification of. So, when you're ready to, and I understand you did submit that, but I don't know how that fits into what the items that Steve had talked about last year. But we do need to set up an appointment once your committee looks at the needs and votes the needs, and then meets with us, and then we can see how that fits into the bigger.
And I think some of the confusion is that we're referring to it as a capital plan, but really to us it's the technology plan.
Right,
So,
but it's, yeah.
All right, building maintenance under capital budget. I think it wouldn't come as a surprise to anybody to say we've had some roof issues.
We've had some leaks this year. Last year, we spent some money to seal the seams, and it's frankly should buy us some time, although this year has been a particularly harsh year. But for instance, if we look at the sped space, or the space that used to be our sped room and is now being rented to PAC, that repair has been wonderful, and it's done away with those leaking issues. Although we know we're coming to the end of the useful life of this roof, the end is near. And we continue to have some problems with some of the gable ends of the peaked roof. There are some repair projects that programs that the state has, although the standards for them have certainly increased, and the amount of material they want to apply has gone up. But there are a number of issues in this building that need to be taken care of, and we've talked about them. It's been the roof. Mr. Elliott's talked about the need to replace some of the single-pane windows we have with more energy-efficient windows. We have unit ventilators in some parts of this classroom, some parts of this building that are way older than I think the parents of some of our students today, not just the students. And really, I think we've reached the point where these are expensive repairs. Now, I think the last time the building was rehabbed was actually it was more than 15 years ago. It was
93, 94.
Yeah, it's been a while. And so really my suggestion is that, and we have a new committee, that the new committee start to consider those items, involve the permanent school and municipal building committee, because any major repairs by bylaw would be involved with them. And a goal here to identify those, to put some numbers on it, and make the town aware of the magnitude that we're talking about, because this will not be inexpensive, although it will be necessary. So that really is my suggestion. I think the goal should be to be able to come to a town meeting a year from now with a plan and a request. And I think that for this town meeting, and I've had a preliminary conversation with Charlie, I think we may want to see about sponsoring an article. I have the building, town and school building committee sponsor an article, however that works, to provide some money for, we may need some professional help in doing this. So,
Didn't we hit some sort of estimate for the roof at one point?
we do have an estimate for the roof. Now, if we're going to submit it to the state, there's going to be some drawings that are involved, not just an estimate and a survey, those kinds of things. I'm not talking about huge amounts of money, but there will be some requirements for some professional help in preparing this packet to go in to the state.
Do you know off the top of your head what that number was?
I do not remember what that was.
In looking at the Mass Building Authority's website, I think the rules and regulations have changed
They changed dramatically in the last year.
in what they expect when we have building projects. So I think going forward, I think we need design work and plans and stuff to be submitted before we even submit, along with our application for a project, is what I saw when I looked at it.
So when
It's
this
very
program,
confusing.
when this repair program started, not that many years ago, it really, in order to get in the door and get moving, it really did not take much beyond what we and Jerry Elliott were capable of putting together and submitting. And I think that over time, they found out that in too many instances, what we really thought it was going to take was much more than it was going to require. And some town meetings were then asked to fund these projects and did not have reliable cost estimates to work with, and balked at moving forward. And so they've tightened up that whole process. So that, and again, it's not, we're not talking about an architect and the plans and specifications to go with a complete rehab, but we are talking about something above what you'd have at the local level.
Do we have an architectural drawing program at the high school?
Do we have we have a CAD program at the high school. They do, or CAD course, they use AutoCAD as the teaching vehicle. In fact, it's an adult ed program. If anybody's interested in taking it, come on down.
Oh, so you don't have architectural drawing as a course? Huh?
We have it as part of a computer-aided design program.
But it's for evening school?
No, it's actually during the day. We also
have
have
it
it
for
offer
students.
during evening school. As part of a project, what they would do is design simple structures like garages, additions to houses. those sorts
Okay,
of
so
things.
it would be beyond their capability, even with supervision, to take something like this on?
I think the issue may come in the cost estimate part of it.
Okay.
They may be able to provide some help, do typical cross-sections of what a roof might look like. But having said that, while they would have the technical ability, I think, to put that together, in fact, I'm sure that they would not be current in building codes to be able to put together what's required for the current energy code, never mind the stretch code that Halifax adopted, as well as, and just in the last few years, I know there have been some changes about buildings being earthquake-proof and fastening clips and sort of all of those kinds of things. I'm not sure that I'd say that they'd be able to do that.
Just a thought.
It's a wonderful thought.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
I'm always looking at ways.
Yes.
Occurred to me, we could take a similar idea and approach one of the universities that teaches an architectural program. The Boston Architectural School, I know, have done similar projects for towns and libraries, some senior home, nursing homes and such. It might be worthwhile to see if one of the universities may have some resources that we may be able to use, and also give somebody some opportunity for some credit towards their degree. So I see that as potentially a win-win.
Well, that's probably something you could look at if Jerry Elliott had the time and the ability to oversee that. that might be a way to go.
Kim has a comment.
We're talking about the roof, and we certainly know that we need to come up with a design, and however we do that, we do that. But, John, can you just remind me of the cost of the roof? Is it somewhere around $300,000?
I was going to say, my recollection is that the allowance figure was $350,000 plus or minus $50,000. Part of what is unknown is, as I remember back when this first got talked about, is existing conditions. So of course it's a membrane roof and nobody's looked under it in some period of time. We're unsure as to what the insulation is there now and whether it would meet current code or not. And of course, in this past year we've adopted a stretch code here in town for that as well.
Which is very similar to the new codes anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
the benefit of that was, to become a green community and hopefully seek funding for projects like this, or projects like the one. I know Charlie's going to talk about that.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with the stretch code. It's just that, we're probably early 1990s in terms of design.
And certainly we have some issues with the design of the roof, with the library, so we don't know really what, like you said, we don't really know what we're going to find. So, it's definitely a huge project that will have to be that bonded. There's no way, I don't think we could
I agree.
come up with that on our own. So it's just something we're planning for, and I think it's important to talk about that when we talk about the scheme of, the town's overall capital plans and the taxpayers knowing that their taxes will be going up for, just the operating budget and then a potential roof. So.
Yeah, and I think if this is going to move forward, town needs to be involved to figure out at what point it fits into maybe a debt service schedule so that it takes the place of something that's falling off. And certainly a project like this is going to take some time for the town to get comfortable with and believe that there's a need for it. And have it.
Really? The grocery store tonight, my son's like, Ma, the roof's leaking. Yeah, I know, okay.
Maybe they should take a drive over to Bridgewater.
Well, although I would say that we have 6 school buildings, and this has been a very unusual year. We have some leaks in buildings that we have never had leaks before. They're just not designed for the amount of abuse that they've taken over this last month. The design was not for 48 inches of snow to sit there. It has found every nook and cranny that could possibly leak.
I think that Kim makes a really good point, though, that it's one of those things that's going to be such a hefty expense that we sort of need to wicked plan for and make people aware that this is on our radar, as far as the town is concerned.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's not like, surprise, we need $400,000, you know what I mean? So.
And the roof is something we've been talking about.
Well, again, you look at a membrane, you look at a membrane roof and you say it's got a life expectancy of 20 to 25 years, and that's it. We did some major repairs to it in terms of prolonging its life last year. That bought us some time, but again, the end of its useful life is coming. Sad but true.
You can only do so
Now,
much.
given the problems that Bridgewater's had with some roofs, and frankly, given the cost of replacing this building, replacing a roof is relatively short money. Protecting the value of the building, and it's an expensive project, but it's a 25-year fix. And I shouldn't even say fix; it's a replacement.
It's maintenance.
It's maintenance. Yep.
It's just costly maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like replacing a light bulb.
Yep. So I'd suggest our new subcommittee maybe have a conversation with the municipal school building committee and figure out how we want to move forward. Charlie will be here, and there's certainly perhaps some green money that could be involved. MSBA, Mass School Building Authority, has a grant program where they are giving you a portion of the construction costs, repair costs. So all of that can be parlayed, and let's. It's still going to be a $350,000 plus or minus project. The question is, how much does Halifax have to come up with, and how much help can we get elsewhere? And I think it's worth the time and effort to pull that all together.
All right. Administrative review, report of February 23rd meeting. Admin review met and discussed the contract for the incoming superintendent, which will be presented at the joint meeting scheduled for March 12th at 6 p.m. at Silver Lake Regional High School in the large group room. Lisa Turcott had sent out an email to the Union 31 members and the Silver Lake members. I would appreciate it if everybody could reply so we can see if we have a quorum. So we can, see, I don't know who's replied or who hasn't.
You have replied.
I did.
Okay.
I think I was the first one to reply.
Were you really? I didn't know that.
So, just so that we know if we have a quorum, and I'm talking to the Halifax committee and the Halifax members of Union 31. Silver Lake has a meeting scheduled for that night, so it's really not a big deal for everybody else to come out an hour early.
It's in the big room upstairs.
Big room upstairs, same place we met for the last joint meeting,
March 13th,
March 12th.
March 12th.
Thursday.
Thursday, March 12th.
I mixed the two. There's one going on.
It was a subcommittee meeting.
It was the admin review subcommittee meeting, so I represent this committee. It's an open meeting, anybody can come, so, but you don't particularly have to be there.
I thought.
So it's okay. It's all right. So then we go on to Union 31. We are trying, what?
Go ahead, isn't that what we just talked about?
Well, no, the admin review meeting was the update of the meeting we had, and that there's gonna be a joint meeting. So the joint meeting, which is Union 31 and Silver Lake, we're trying to schedule the meeting for March 12th, and it will include a discussion of the contract for the incoming superintendent, the shared cost budget, the bylaw change request, and an assistant superintendent search procedure or protocol. It has been quite a while since we've had a superintendent or an assistant superintendent search. I came in for Silver Lake on the tail end of hiring our current assistant superintendent. My first meeting was when the committee got to vote yes or no in the choice for assistant superintendent. So I'm not really sure of the process. So I think given where we all are among the district committees, I think a conversation on how it works would be appropriate, so.
Yes, please.
So that's the plan for the joint meeting, and we have an hour for the meeting, so. Yeah, I'm trying to pack a lot into the meeting, okay?
That's why you make the big bucks.
Yes. All right, so we can start with administration principals report.
Thank you. I'd like to start out with my report by thanking Mr. Tuffy first tonight for not calling a snow day today.
Yay!
It was nice to have the students back in school, and certainly we had a full week last week. We're hoping for another full week this week. I'd also like to say that spring is 17 days, 22 hours, 53 minutes, and 39 seconds away. Not that anyone's counting. Our current enrollment is 565. That's kindergarten through grade 6. We've also sent out projected enrollment letters to all of our incoming kindergarten class. And currently, we have 62 students that are currently enrolled or will be enrolled for kindergarten for 15-16. Our first kindergarten countdown meeting will be held on Wednesday, March 18th. That's where all the parents, the incoming kindergarten parents will come in. We'll meet with our staff, our kindergarten staff, as well as our school psychologist, our school adjustment counselor, our school nurse, Mr. Beaudry and myself, to discuss what, what we do in kindergarten and what to expect as kindergarten parents. So we're very excited about that. It's hard to believe we're already at that point in the year where we're looking at that. MCAS tests are soon to arrive. I've started to clear out my office so I can have space for all of those tests that are coming. I know that teachers in grades 3 through 6 have been working extremely hard preparing all of the students for the MCAS test, which is coming up very soon. Mrs. Blackwood, are you going to talk a little bit about that? Okay, about the calendar changes. I also want to let everyone know that as we prepare for testing again, we would like to remind parents that during MCAS testing cycles, in order to comply with the state's recommended procedures, unfortunately, there will be no visitors or volunteers in the school during those testing periods. Also, our MCAS Study Island Rally is going to be moved up to Friday, March 27th. Today was a very exciting day here in Halifax. It was Read Across America Day, where we celebrated Dr. Seuss's birthday. We had guest readers in every single classroom in our school today, which included Mrs. Roy, also our fire chief, our town manager, many other dignitaries from town. It was such an exciting day. Each and every one of those volunteers did get to go to one of our classrooms and read one of their favorite stories. The students were excited, the adults were excited about going back into a classroom and reading. I know Mrs. Roy had a great experience. I think she read twice. So we certainly do appreciate everyone coming in and celebrating today. Looking at our calendar of events, we have on tomorrow the program of studies for grade 6 over at the middle school, and that's at 6 o'clock. On March 9th, we're looking at spring pictures. 16th through 20th is our book fair, and also family reading night, which the PTO will be sponsoring, and that will be from 5:30 to 7:30, and that's on the 19th. On the 18th is our PTO meeting at 7 p.m. Actually, I'm crossing that off. They changed that. They will be rescheduling the PTO meeting. And I don't have the date, Mrs. Wallace.
We've had Mrs. Brown with Doc at the school, so I'll
Thank you. That is the night of our incoming kindergarten parent workshop. On the 23rd, believe it or not, we have report cards going home. On the 25th is our school council meeting. On the 26th is our early release for parent conferences. And on the 30th, MCAS testing will begin in grade 5. Does anyone have any questions?
You, Mrs. Blackwood, you said you were going to talk more about the MCAS.
Yes.
Okay, wait.
Claudia, and I don't know if you're going to have an answer for me, but I know as we talk about incoming kindergarten students, typically for Halifax, we see an increase over the summer.
We do.
How many students do we typically see that increase for?
Well, we've gone up since, in just over the past couple of weeks, we've gone up over 10.
Okay.
So, you know, typically between now and the summer, we increase by sometimes 20.
How many, where are we at right now?
We're currently at 62.
Well, and see, and then there is a point to me asking this question, because right now, if we're at 62 kids, you know, it's 3 sections.
Yeah.
If we increase 20 more kids,
There's 4, yeah.
it's 4 sections. So, I mean, it's, and this is all tied to the budget, and, you know, I'm nervous. Because of the way the number is right now. But I don't want to say, okay, we can go with that number and end up with,
Well, we'd have to hire teachers, no doubt.
well, no, because if we don't have the money in the budget, we can't.
Yeah, we just have a bigger classroom, which we don't have the money in the budget.
So,
And it is hard to say, because traditionally this time every year, our numbers are quite lower. And they seem to always, every year, increase. And it's really hard to predict when that's going to happen. But, you know, since the letters have gone out, more and more people are saying, well, gosh, did you get your letter? And I think some people are mentioning it perhaps on social media. I don't know if that's the case. But that's how we've gotten the extra 10 since the letters went out as well. From people saying, oh, I received my letter in the mail, have you? And that's when they said, you know, gosh, you know, I better call the school and make sure that my name is on that list as well.
There was a post on social media within the last day or so
Oh, it
regarding that
was?
issue.
Okay.
okay.
4
But-
kindergarten teachers?
Yes.
We have 4 for every grade.
That's
For
what I thought.
teachers in every
Mhm.
grade.
All
So
right.
I can keep you up to speed with that?
Absolutely. Because the more that, that number climbs, the more uneasy I get. As far as, when we're looking at the budget. So, and I really want to make sure that we get it right, because it could be potentially devastating for kindergarten classes if we don't. So, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is Charlie here?
He is in back.
See, I can't even see. All right, so. I didn't even see him come in. So we have an appointment with Charlie at 8 o'clock to talk about the green initiatives and the energy efficiency projects. Charlie, can you come on up?
Come on down.
Yeah. 2 chairs. Yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly what you know or don't know, but I knew that you wanted at least a slight update as to where things stood. Back in January, we had actually sent in the application to use the money that we've been allocated. We don't get this check, despite the big check that we have sitting in the selectman's office, without sending an actual grant application in. We're not competing with other communities for that pot of money. That's will happen in subsequent years. But we have to have projects that qualify. At this point, it looks very promising. I'm hoping in the next few days, in fact, that we'll get the announcement saying, yes, start going ahead. The question only is whether we're going to be able to get work done in April, or we'll have to wait until school ends at the end of June. And that's a matter of when the state actually announces, when I have to have everything signed off by anybody who needs to sign it off, and then working with our contractors on the 2 projects we have scheduled for the school. And that means also obviously working with the school staff and seeing whether we can fit the work that we'd like to get done during those 4 days in April or not. If we can't, and we can't make other arrangements like evenings or something like that, then we'll wait until after the end of the school year to get this work done. Thankfully, at least in the heating season, we aren't losing any more money by going from April to June. I'm hoping we won't lose a lot of money from doing that. But the plan would be then to have everything in place by the time school started again next, I don't know if it's August or September. So it's August before Labor Day, or at least September before Labor Day.
I think we're starting in September. Because of Labor Day.
Suggestion will be September 2nd.
So we have 2 projects for the school. I took the pot of money we had, and I thought in terms of the school, that's probably in the sense of the most public building we've got outside, maybe of town hall. In the sense that more people will notice what's going on by changing the lighting, by getting the thermostats replaced with new mag thermostats. And there'll be a noticeable impact, not just on the school budget, but on visibility. In terms of energy savings, don't know whether you got this stuff or not, and I have basic handouts about the 2 projects, but the thermostat project should save between electricity and natural gas costs something like over $6,000 a year. I wouldn't budget that automatically into the 16 budget. I certainly budget some of it, 2/3 of it, something like that, because once you start changing things, people's usage habits might change also. I would certainly budget some of the savings into the fiscal 16 budget. For the electricity, it's more substantial. We would be saving about $20,000 a year on changing all the lights, or most of the lights. There's a full schedule of the lights that would be changed. We would save about 156 kilowatt hours a year, and that translates into, back when they were working on this, when the rates were actually a little bit lower, 20,000. I would expect we're going to save a bit more than that, because now the rates are higher. When we had sent in the original application, we were using rates that we had in the fall of 2014, before we had the rate hikes that went into effect. We have a 3-year contract now for electricity. It's a set price for those 3 years. But what happened was that our expiration date for our previous contract hit at, in essence, the wrong point. There was always going to be a point where we might see that cliff. Unfortunately, it's climbing a cliff rather than dropping down, and that's what happened this fall. I think you all saw that probably with your residential electricity for that matter. It's the same thing happened for businesses and for the town government. But I would, again, not factor all the savings into the fiscal 16 budget, but factor some of them in.
The cost of the light bulbs and thermostats and stuff, that's under a grant?
It's mostly under a grant. There's going to be a payback of 8 months using a surcharge on the school bills. So that you'll save more money than you'll spend during that time, during the 12 months of the fiscal year, because again, most electricity costs obviously are going to occur, in terms of the lighting at least, during the school years, from September to June. We'll have all the light bulbs installed during the summer.
Go ahead.
You're talking about the majority of the new lighting LEDs, I presume?
Yeah. And again, I don't know what has been given to you.
It's all gone out electronically, so.
So, yeah, I mean, for instance, we have 32 under one category of LED lighting. It's LED all the way down.
Yeah, there's a huge savings, as you know, with LEDs.
Obviously, I'll tell you all, tell the school staff and such, when the announcement goes out, and see what we can do or not do, which way we're going to go, but to keep you all and the school administration informed.
All right, so the town's not exactly sure this is going forward at this point.
It's good. I'm as sure as I can be without saying I'm absolutely positively sure. Let's put it that way. I've been given every indication the projects that we submitted meet the criteria. I've been given no indication that they don't. I expect that we'll get in the next few days an announcement indicating that.
So we should know by our April meeting
Yes.
whether the projects are going to happen or not.
Yes, and by April, certainly, if I get an announcement next week, this week, whatever, we'll know by the April meeting, was there enough time to get everything started during the April vacation, or are we going to wait until after the school year ends?
Okay. I can only speak for myself here. When it comes to, tweaking the numbers for utilities, I'm nervous, because if we don't have a guarantee that we can get the work done, and we tweak the numbers, we put ourselves in a position of being, and when we're talking about $20,000, that's a lot to make up, especially when some of our line items swing so hugely, so.
So you were just talking about one school teacher.
Exactly, so if we can get a guarantee that the projects are going to happen over the summer, we can tweak those numbers for utilities, but I think until we have that, it'd be...
But by April, you'll certainly know what we
Okay.
have.
All right.
Charlie, can I have a copy of this one?
Sure.
This is moving in the
There's one
right
on the
direction.
electronic board.
We're really,
The printer's on the fritz.
I thought I remembered saying that. I just wanted to be sure.
and I just want to thank Charlie for all the work that he's done in becoming a green community. We really couldn't be green without him, so. No, better than being blue. But no, he really, when we went to the ceremony, when we were officially deemed green, I was talking to some other towns, and they were in process for about 5 years to try to get the application done and get the process complete. And Charlie did it in less than a year, so.
Well, it only worked because everybody else was on board.
No, I
School
understand.
Committee, school administration, our
I know.
building inspector was an enormous
Yeah.
influence in terms of working with the trades, because there were a lot of questions back a year ago as to how that would work out. But getting the support of you all, him, of the board of selectmen, ultimately of the town meeting, that's what made it possible.
It's huge, and it's really, we are moving forward, and it's making a big difference. Just in the grants, to be able to provide these light bulbs and all the things that will make us energy efficient, that saves money in the long run. This is what we really need. We
And they last a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Thank you very much for coming over. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I mean, with the finance committee not meeting tonight, I didn't know what I was going to do with myself.
Glad we helped you out. Why go home?
All right, well, our sped director is now here, so we can move along to her presentation.
Well, good evening.
Good evening. Why don't you introduce it, because I'm not sure the committee actually knows who you are.
Hi, I'm Mary Sullivan Kelly. I'm the administrator for special education for the district. This is my 4th year in the district. I've been busy and people have been busy, and it's a good district, I can tell you that. I'm looking forward to just giving you some basic information about special ed. One of the big issues is, why do we even have to pay all this money? Why does a child go out of district? I mean, these are schools, why can't the children just stay in school? And there's a very long, involved answer, but don't worry, I'll pare it right down. The reason that children go to out-of-district placements is because they have an identified disability that cannot be serviced and they cannot learn or access to learning in the general public school setting. Now, does that mean every child on who is special ed eligible goes out of district? Of course not. This district has many, many programs. It has programs that, we have programs that are self-contained or more supported district-wide, and most of our children are serviced right in the general education classroom with special ed support. The majority of our special education children are, in fact, serviced in their buildings, in their home buildings. It's a very small number of children who go out of district. And so, we talk about out of district. We know that it's an expensive placement, but now we're getting the idea that children go out because they need to go out because we can't service them. So how do you get to be special ed? How do you get to be special ed eligible? And how is it determined? And how come some children stay in district and are serviced beautifully, and how come some children have to go out of district? Well, the regulations are from the laws, and the law that started all of this really is a civil rights law. And it basically said it's an anti-discrimination law. And then we had a law before that education cannot be separate and considered equal. So when you put those two laws together, you come up with the law of 1975, which was the Education for Handicapped Children. And what that law does is it guarantees that children with identified disabilities are eligible for special ed services are provided those services in the least restrictive environment for them, which is usually their own home school. What happens? How do you go through this process? No one person determines if a child is special ed eligible. It is a very legally bound process. Because it is a legally bound process, we have to send out notices. We have to get parent permission. We have to do some testing. Before we do any of that, we do RTI, response to intervention. We do Title I services. The teachers adjust their instruction. They accommodate and modify. It's only then that we determine that, gee, we're really not sure what's going on. We should really do some assessment. We ask for parents' permission. We get written permission that we can do some testing. We then do the testing. We sit down after we've done the testing and we determine, does the child have a disability? The Department of Ed, about maybe 10 years ago, determined that we were going to become categorical. We and California were the only two non-categorical states. That meant that we were going to identify what the educational disability was. The Department of Ed then ran workshops and identified, I think it was 9 disabilities, and gave us definitions and ranges of disability levels in those topic areas. Some of the disabilities are some that you're very familiar with. One would be autism. If a child has autism, And we determined that he comes to us, he has an autism diagnosis from an outside clinician. He comes to us, and we've gone through RTI with him. We've done classroom adjustment instruction. We have done Title I, whatever we can do, and we say, gee, he's not learning at the level that we would expect. It's then that we ask for permission from the parents to test. It's then that we would sit down after we do the testing, and we do testing in academics, maybe in therapies. Definitely, we review the educational history, and sometimes we do cognitive assessment, not so much to get a cognitive level, but really to find out what's the listening ability, what's the listening memory, what's the visual memory, what's a long-term memory, and processing speed. How long does it take for the child to really adjust and pull together an answer when he's been given a question? We look at those test results, and then we sit down and we go through an eligibility flow sheet. And that means we ask a number of questions. Does the child have a disability? In this example, it's autism. We'll say, yes, he does. Is that the reason? Is that disability the reason that he's not making effective progress? Then we go back over the testing. We listen to the classroom teacher, who fills out a report also. And we talk about what is effective progress for this child. What does that mean? And if we say no, this disability, his level of anxiety or the way that he ruminates, it's very hard for him to go from one subject to the other. That really this is something that's interfering, that he has a disability, he's not making effective progress. And then the other question is, does he require special education instruction? Does he require specialized instruction? Those are the kinds of questions that we ask on an initial. The important thing to come out of just that view, you can see how long it takes, you can see the intensity of the decision making, you can see the amount of people involved in the different roles people have, and it's only after that meeting, or at that meeting, that we determine eligibility for special education. If the child is eligible, we write something, and I know you've heard of it, an IEP, an Individualized Education Program. And again, that's a legal document. So we would then send out a notice to the parent that, we're proposing these services. We ask again for their signature. If they don't sign it, we don't provide those services. So it's a very specified process. Other disabilities are more that you're familiar with, a learning disabled child. There's a whole framework that we have to go through as part of the testing process beyond what I've described to determine if a child has a learning disability. We also have children with low incident disabilities, might be visually or hearing impaired. We have health disabilities. We also have children with emotional disabilities. So just to review what the process is, children go to out-of-district placements generally because we have exhausted our resources for that child and we cannot provide for them. We have multiple resources in the district, and we use them and use them very well because the majority of our children are serviced in their home school and in their grade level. There's a process that we have to go through. No one person determines if a child is special ed eligible. No one person. There's a team effort, parents, specialists, generalists. We all do that, and there's a forum that we have to go through. We have to go through a process. And at the last question, I think, or one of the big issues, we talked about how expensive the out-of-district placements are. As with everything else, no one person determines the price for those out-of-district placements. That's determined by the state of Massachusetts as a governing board that presents those costs for out-of-district placements. They're presented, I think, quarterly. They give you an annual overview, and they usually alert us if there's going to be a change in price. And I can guarantee you the change is never a negative. It is always a positive. I learned that right away. And one more bit of information for the children who go to out-of-district placements. Those are very intense educational environments. They are small groups of small classroom groups. They have multiple service providers, multiple teachers, therapists, psychologists. Some of our programs have nurses right there in the room. Some of our children travel to and from a program with a nurse. So those, by the level of service that the child requires, those reflect the level of services. And that's one of the reasons that they really are so costly compared to education inside the district. I think that's just generally kind of a quick view of what out-of-district placements are and how you get there and that kind of thing.
Could you just give me a few examples of, like, I understand the process, but what we don't have in the Silver Lake district that we send a child out of district for?
Sure. I think one of the most difficult placements are those for children who have, I'm going to say behavior, and behavior I'm going to define it as anything you can see somebody do. So it's a value neutral term. But have behavioral issues. That is, we can see their behavior, the way they deal with the world is different than how their peers do. And that's based on an emotional disability or a psychiatric disability. Those are very difficult. The other is children, and that would fall with children who have serious medical conditions. We have a number of our children who are very medically involved, and they are in out-of-district placements because of the specialties that they require. Some children also because of multiple disabilities, which may be physical, may be low incident, visual, may be cognitive. It might be a combination of all of those, that they are in out-of-district placements. We have very few children out with significant learning disabilities, although we have a very small group of kids. It's mostly the child who requires a lot more specialized support, and we don't have a critical mass of children with that disability, so we could not form a classroom. We might have somebody at the 12th grade, might have somebody at the 4th grade, we might have somebody at the 7th. So there's also that piece. But the children who are out, they require something that we don't have.
So would a body fill that, something we don't have, like a specialized teacher? Or is it the physical space?
It's
both?
It is the support services that and the specialty that the district placement provides for students. It is a whole training component. It's a whole service delivery many kids are in. The majority of our out-of-district kids are in collaborative placements. Collaborative placements are those that are really the public schools feed into them. They are the most cost-effective of all the placements. We have very few children in non-public school placements. We pay tuition to the collaboratives, and they have specialty programs and they support the children. Everybody is trained. They have a physical setup that makes more sense for the children, one that we can provide here.
If I could, over the last few years, Marion started a number of programs here in district. So when we talk about programs that are outside an inclusion program, what's happening in a regular class, we have what I call in-district, out-of-district programs. And by that I mean we combine students from Halifax, Kingston, and Plimpton because that gives us a critical mass of students to run a program. Most common example of that is the integrated preschool that runs at Kingston. That starts with children of 3. But we also run some programs both at the elementary and secondary level where we are taking students from the 3 towns and bringing in a teacher. We have the space, and we look at that and say, gee, we can do that. We can do a job that's as good, if not better. Then we can purchase that service from somebody else, and we can do it often for less money and have those students closer to their peers, closer to their family, closer to their public school experience. Going up the ladder, if you will, of cost, as Mary suggests, are our collaborative programs. Pilgrim Area Collaborative, a group that we're a member of, for instance, although We do use North River Collaborative or Reed's Collaborative, which happen to be other collaboratives. Those are quasi-public organizations. They're not-for-profit. The costs, it's a cost recovery model. They're not there to make a dollar. They're there to provide a service. And from there it goes to private schools and private placements, and it's part of a rate-setting process. OSD sets the rates every year, and then we get to the very expensive programs, which may be a residential program or a hospital setting. So we're looking at it, and some programs come and go as the kinds of students that we have come and go. And part of it is we get better at dealing with students. You know, we run some autism programs now in district, whereas a few years ago, we did not know how to deal with it, and that would have been a purchase service. So we're always looking for those programs to see what makes sense, what will provide a good service, and frankly, be cost effective.
When was autism first recognized as a disability?
Not that long ago. I would say within the last 10, 15 years.
Did it not exist before that, or was it just not recognized?
It wasn't recognized as autism. Many times, I think it was identified as either emotionally disturbed or cognitive or intellectually impaired. But in terms of a disability, I think it's been about 15 years. And again, we were categorical until about 10 years ago.
How did you deal with it before then?
Before then, you had a disability or you didn't. You were special ed eligible. It didn't, you know, we would say it was, you know, the problems reading and writing, or the problem was math, or the problem was social skills, or whatever it was, but there was no label to it. There was no definition.
So that's just one of, I presume, a number of recognized disabilities?
Yes.
Did you say there was 9?
I believe there were 9.
9, okay.
I'm not good with numbers. It's too late. Autism, developmental delays for children up to age 9, because we recognize that development is never even and we don't want to give anybody a label. Intellectual, you know what that is. Sensory, we're talking about our low incident population that have a hearing or a vision problem, deaf, blind. Neurological is mostly with it would be a post-trauma, a stroke. It can be processing deficits. Emotional, we talked about that. A general category is communication, and that would be somebody who does not have the grammatical structure and the content available to them to really communicate in an effective manner. Yeah, a physical disability, we talked a little bit about that. That would be one that would be limited to perhaps cerebral palsy, some other physical disabilities. Specific learning, we talked about learning disability. And the last one was health, and we had mentioned that. Those are the disabilities, disability categories.
So I have a question, breaker reimbursement, correct?
Correct. I believe the foundation amount is 41,000 and some change for this year as we do our circuit breaker. And it's a reimbursement process, so we would be reimbursed the following year, or is it the year after? I was confused.
Subsequent year. So
Subsequent.
what we spend money on this year, we get is our claim for next year. So if you have people who move in this year, you have the expense, you don't have the revenue. And the next year, you have the revenue, and in fact, you might not have the expense because you might have a student that either moved or aged out or had a change in placement that might be less expensive.
But if I heard you correctly, Casey, they have to meet a certain, the 41,000 and change?
Yes,
and before they qualify for. So if they're just under it, we get no reimbursement
The town
at all?
gets
And if they're
none.
42, then we get all 42 back?
No.
Or is it
No.
percentage?
No.
Percentage.
John, so circuit breaker is one of those things that sounds better than it is. It really does. To begin with, it is eligible expenses. So you may have somebody who needs to be transported to a particular school to access the program because that's what they need. Transportation is not included. So Yeah, I know. Just accept it and go forward.
It is.
So, for instance, what is not uncommon is somebody who goes to a collaborative, and the cost between transportation and tuition for a collaborative program might be $50,000. But transportation is, let's say transportation is $15,000 of that. You as the school district own the first $41,000 of expense. That means you collect absolutely nothing. You might have somebody that goes to a specialized day program, and that might be divided between $50,000 in tuition and $25,000 in transportation. So you're spending $75,000 on that child's education, and believe me, nobody disagrees that they need that program, they need that education. We're never going to be able to service them. So that $75,000, 25 is transportation, that doesn't count. You never get reimbursed on that. $50,000 is tuition. The first $41,000 is what you get, what you pay. So now you're getting $9,000, 41 to 50, and you get, it depends on the year, somewhere between 28 and 72%, depending on what year it's been.
Of $9,000.
Of $9,000. That's right. And so it really is a program that is very helpful when you get the incredibly expensive residential programs or hospital settings. I mean, it makes all the difference in the world. But for those students that are not severely disabled, you're not really going to ever collect a lot of money. You're not going to get a lot of help. It really is a cost that falls on the citizens of Halifax.
May I ask John a question? Can you recount the percentage of circuit breaker reimbursement and how it's changed throughout, say, the past 10 years?
Well, I really can't. I mean, it's a program that probably goes back about 10 years. The very first year that it came out, they had a little whoops moment, and instead of getting a significant amount, we got 28%. That was a huge shock. That's when they were going to reimburse you in the current year, and they had no sense of what that was. So they changed it to a reimbursement model. Now so really these last few years, it's bounced around between 50 and 70%. 65 has been a number that it's been at for a few years. What it's going to be next year, gosh, we really don't know because we haven't seen the budget. Come Wednesday, the day after tomorrow, the governor's going to release his budget. We'll get a sense of what that reimbursement rate is. And in fact, in this current year, what we know is that Governor Patrick in December, released what are called 9C cuts and cut some money out of circuit breaker. Just a couple of weeks ago, Governor Baker released his version of 9C cuts, and there was some money that came out of circuit breaker. And at this point in time, I don't know if those two cuts were additive or whether Governor Baker's number is the number we live with and Governor Patrick's number didn't count. So we're still trying to work out exactly what we're going to get this year. But by the way, those cuts were in sort of the 1 to 3% range. They were not huge deal breaker cuts.
And since our meeting wasn't televised, can you just talk a little bit about the current projected costs of special education students to give the public a sense just how much of a financial responsibility this is for the district?
Well, if we talk about out-of-district special education, and I sort of always hate to separate it like that, but that is the reality of what we're talking about. Looking at next year, the 15-16 budget year, we are looking at transportation costs of $446,000. And in terms of what we call program with others, which is to say students that can't be serviced here in the Halifax Elementary School, that is a total of $1,509,000. So those are some very large numbers. Now that $1,509,000 includes an estimated circuit breaker reimbursement rate of 50%. We don't know exactly what that number is going to be. Each 5% is worth how much, Christine?
$22,000.
So we have it at 50%. If it's 65%, which we'd like to see, we'll know Wednesday, that's another $66,000 that comes off. In terms of how do we budget for that, Mary and Christine spend an awful lot of time on those issues, and we have a list. It's a list of names, which we won't share with you, but a list of, because of privacy regulations, but people who are known to us, who are either in the system right now, or we expect to be in the system, because we cover students from 3 to 22. 3 to 22 is the age range that we deal with for this program. We take out the students that will age out, or students that we expect to go to a different placement. We include students that will be joining us, or students we expect their placement to change. And then based upon actual occurrence, because this is a relatively small number, and compared to the 600 students in this building, a relatively small number of cases. And that's what makes up that number.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Lori Costa Klein from Halifax. I have a couple questions. Can you kind of explain from a benchmark is not the right word, but comparative to other towns? I'd imagine every town goes through this. Halifax isn't unique. Do we have a larger percentage of towns in our area that have out-of-district students that can't be serviced within the district compared to others outside of our district? Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not aware of the numbers. I really couldn't even address that. But I will tell you just generally, we're running about, I think it's 12 to 15% for our special ed, general special ed, not out of district, but just anybody who is identified as special ed, that percentage of the population. And when I looked at Halifax, for our numbers right now, remember it's ages 3 to age 21, for our out-of-district, all of that population who are out-of-district, it's 17 that are in collaborative programs, which are an extension of the public school, and 3 that are in private.
Okay.
And the rest are either in our in-district, out-of-district programs, or are serviced in our classrooms.
So
from
of that 12 to 15% roughly that makes up special education, what percentage of, if that's 100%, what percentage is serviced outside of our district? And you may have just said that and I didn't grasp it, sorry.
No, I didn't say that. You grasped everything, so. I'm trying to think. You know what, I didn't do the numbers. But
Okay.
It's very low.
Okay.
If I could.
Go ahead.
We look at this every now and again, and a few years ago, we looked at it in conjunction with some issues that Kingston had about rising costs. And what we find is that we're a little different and a little unique here. Not in terms of the total numbers, but how we do our accounting. Because Halifax is a 7th grade school system, K-6. But because you're part of a region and a regional agreement, this K-6 system takes all the costs for out-of-district placements for 3 through 22, as opposed to if you were in Carver. That's a 13 grade system, it's a K-12. So when you take all of the costs for Halifax, Kingston, and Plimpton elementary schools, and you take the Silver Lake costs, because we have some of those costs as well, and you add them up, and then make an allocation based upon population, it turns out that your numbers are about where you would expect your numbers to be. We are certainly not at the upper end of expenses, and we're not at the lower end of expenses. We're reasonably close to the middle and close to what surrounding towns are.
Can I ask one more question, and it's more about the process? So I understand that when you're making a determination about where a child can be serviced, it's a team that collaborates to make that decision. And the team would involve specialists, it might involve their teachers, it would involve their parents, certainly. Who ultimately has the final say in that decision should the town and the parent disagree, or the team not agree on what the right path is for that student?
In any team, the final decision in terms of what the district provides or proposes as the IEP, that lies with the chairperson. that final decision. Then after that, there is a dispute resolution process through the Bureau of Special Education Appeals, which includes mediation, which is very informal, all the way up to Bureau of Special Ed Appeals.
And do we typically see situations that are escalated, or do the teams generally come to consensus on the right path for that
Teams
student?
generally come to consensus, and I've never had a meeting which has been an initial meeting for a child, and then the child's gone out of district. I mean, that has never happened. We've always, it's always small steps. So, no, we very seldom does that happen. Basically, it happens at the team, and we're fine. Often we'll have a meeting after a team because a parent will say, I'm really not clear on something. Well, that's fine, so we'll call the team back together.
Thank you for clarifying.
Are there any other questions?
Just in terms of the budget, just so I make sure I'm really clearly understanding this, the total in-house sped expense and the total out-of-district sped expense combined is $2,821,859. So I'm adding this total under out-of-district and this total under special education.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, so then the regular day, so that's 12 to 15% of our population. And then the regular day for the other 85 to 88% of the population is 4,340,000, roughly. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you for coming tonight.
Yes, thank you very much. Very
Thank you,
informative.
Steve. Appreciate that.
All right. Did we finish with you?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes, I think we did.
Thank you. Okay, so on to the assistant superintendent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have in front of you a lavender, new MCAS schedule.
Much less offensive than the old pink one that we had last time.
Well, I'd like to keep people awake, so I always try to fit in some color. During vacation week on February 19th, we received a memorandum from the Department of Education that we were allowed to apply for an extension for giving our MCAS tests. The reason that the Department of Education chose to do that was so many districts had snow days. You may remember we have had 8 snow days, which is a lot of loss of instruction for our students. The state put out a window of dates that we were allowed to apply to extend our schedule. What we did was basically take our schedule that we had on that lovely, very bright pink page that I handed out last month, and it allowed us to shift everything more or less a week for our scheduling. So these are the new dates. We had to accommodate around events that were already scheduled within the schools. There are some parts of the schedule which are set days, for instance, the long comp, but we're very pleased that the state recognized the loss of instructional time. It has been very stressful for our teachers who have been working very hard to prepare our students, so we were able to gain that week. Currently, we have moved our ELA will begin on March 30th, which is our first day of MCAS testing, and that will be for grade 5, and that will be March 30th and March 31st, and there's 2 sessions of that. The schedule, again, if you notice, includes the middle school and the high school for parents to make it easier. It is now posted on our district and is getting posted on the school's websites. Grade 6 will begin on April 1st, and that is ELA Comprehension Session 1. One of the dates that we had to use is April 2nd, and that will be for grades 4, 7, and 10, and that's what's called the long composition. And that's a date that is set by the state. The rest are like windows of testing that we're allowed to schedule within. Part 2 of grade 6 is on April 6th, Monday. Grade 3 will be on the 7th and the 8th. Grade 4, Reading Comprehension Session 1 on the 9th, Session 2 on the 10th. And then the final date for makeup testing is on the 13th. If students are absent on April 2nd, then makeup for the long composition for grade 4 will be on Wednesday, April 8th. So those are the ELA schedules. We also have the math, and we have moved those forward again that week of opportunity that they gave us, and that includes 2 days for science. I'm not going to go through the May dates because I'm sure by the time May rolls around, no one will remember them. But we do have these posted now on the district's websites, and a letter will be going home, or maybe went home today.
It didn't go home today, but it will be going home tomorrow.
A letter will be going home tomorrow to parents with these new dates, just to let them know, to remind them. So we were pleased that the state recognized the impact on instruction of the loss of snow days. So it's actually a good thing.
Question for Mrs. Blackwood. Are we changing the tutoring schedule that's been offered for MCAS? That's remaining the same?
Tutoring actually starts tomorrow.
Right. I just wanted to make sure.
Right.
Thank you. And that'll be offered by our Title I teachers.
Good question.
Anybody have any questions on this? And the high school grade 10, not that we're high school, but just for any parents out there who have older students, the grade 10 schedule is set by the state, but again, it accommodated moving everything forward for those dates. So we were pleased about that. On the other hand, another letter that I got from the Department of Education wasn't as positive. I received a letter from one of the grants that we received, which is Quality Full Day Kindergarten Grant. They reduced the state grants for kindergarten by 22% for this school year, that we're currently in. That grant funds our aides in kindergarten. For Halifax, that means a loss of approximately $6,800. There are 3 different ways we could deal with this loss. One is to reduce the number of hours that the staff is currently working in the kindergarten classrooms. If we reduce them by 45 minutes, we would have to end about 10 to 15 days before school ends. We could have them work until the money runs out, which would mean they would end sometime in early May. The third choice, which would be my recommendation, and I worked with Christine, is to allow them to continue to work until the end of school, and that we would fund it through the current budget. Through some savings within our budget, we believe we can have them work until the end of school without disrupting the schedule and the kindergarten classrooms.
Can you repeat the percentage decline?
22%.
22%.
The state has reduced several of their grants. 2 grants that I personally work with is the Academic Support Grant and the Quality Full Day Kindergarten Grant. The kindergarten grant, because it was ongoing since September, was reduced to 22%. The Academic Support Grant, which offered free summer school for our students, was cut completely. We will have no academic support grant this summer for our high school students, no free summer school. The grant was cut completely.
I have a question. So it was cut 22%. I mean, I think the trend will be in the current, for next fiscal year, that it will be at that level or maybe even lower.
It's hard to say. The way that the letter read, it was due to the current deficit in the budget. So this is a makeup year.
So within your 16 budget that's printed, does that include the loss of the $6,000? No. So is that something that we might have to?
It's never been in the budget.
Oh, okay. But the making up of the difference for the 16 budget. So if it's a 22% reduction this year, the current 16 budget does not reflect that $6,000 difference to make up, so that next year, the 16 school year, that you could make it to the end of the year for funding.
If we knew in the beginning, I'll know in July, it's usually when the numbers come out what it is, the staff would be told and their hours would be reduced automatically.
So that's what the plan is.
The reason why we're dealing with this now was the staff's already hired, they're already working with our students, the schedule is set. It's a much more difficult situation than prior to the beginning of the school year. No problem.
And because we're halfway through the year, 22% cut is equal to 44% when you're just trying to take the annualized cut over 6 months.
Right.
Yeah, it's a bigger deal.
So what do you remove from the current budget to get that $6,000? Where did
We
you
have
find
some
that?
savings within our budget in terms of some of the staff that were hired and within the substitute line.
So it's like substitute teachers that weren't used for whatever reason.
Substitutes the line you're most likely to misrepresent.
Okay.
Some years you spend an inordinate amount of money on substitutes, and I truly mean inordinate. It doesn't mean anything, it just may be that we have 4 or 5 teachers that are pregnant and out for an extended period of time, so it really impacts our budget, but it's offset because the teachers aren't there. So
Gotcha.
it's a balance. This year, Christine believes,
We have a savings in our substitute line, we're just not using substitutes at the same rate that we have in prior years.
Okay, thank you for explaining.
so my recommendation with the school committee's approval would be for us to move forward and to maintain the schedule. If for some reason we discover that we're unable to accommodate it within the budget, we'll deal with that as we get a little bit closer. But at this point in the school year, we would like to maintain our aides. They're really very vital in kindergarten. If you've ever spent any time in kindergarten classroom, 4 hands are not enough, trust me, on this. It really would be a loss. I really have struggled mightily with how to figure this out, and those are really the only 3 options we can come up with. But we've looked at all the towns, the local budgets, and we believe we can maintain. If it gets close to the end and we can't quite make it to the end of the school year, we can work with that. You know, if we have to end them a little bit early, but at this point in time, to reduce their hours and or to reduce when they end would really be detrimental to the classrooms. And I would hope that we could make this work.
Do you mind if I ask the opinion of any kindergarten teachers that might be here?
Go ahead. I don't, it's up to you.
I can personally see 3 of them.
Yeah, I know. I just want to hear it.
Hi, guys.
I'm sure you do, but I just, want to hear it.
Do we need a motion for that?
We need a motion for that because that is actually changing money.
Although I would find it quite amusing to see how that would eventually turn out. No offense, folks. I think you do great, but I'd like to make that motion to transfer funding to allow for continuation of the kindergarten program.
You have to be
We
specific
need
about
the
what
amount,
item.
6,800.
It's got to be the 6,800 in
The
there.
amount of the 6,800.
Okay.
We could just move Joy's recommendation,
Yes.
You could do that too because her recommendation had the amount in it.
and we don't have to repeat it all again.
This motion has been made to.
Second.
Second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Thank you, and I know the teachers thank you.
Just keep us informed.
We'll keep you informed if something changes dramatically,
Yeah.
but we believe we can get there.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions for the assistant superintendent? Superintendent, who's going to turn it over to our business manager?
Well, actually, I'd like to do this a little out of order and take 3 and 4 first and get them out of the way, and then we can end up on
Okay.
the monthly financial statement of the budget, because the last 2 items are somewhat housekeeping items. Item number 3 was the tentative end of school. And you may have noticed we've had some snow days.
Too many.
We've had an inordinate number of snow days. I went back and looked at the last 12 years. I can tell you over the last 12 years, we've had 3 years when we had no snow days. We had 4 years where we had 1 snow day. We had 1 year where we had 2 snow days. We had 1 year with 4, 2 years with 5, and 1 with 6. And included in that was Superstorm Sandy, where we were closed for a couple of days because we didn't have power, and a year where we started late because of a hurricane that hit in August. So it's been a very unusual year, not something I think we're going to repeat right away. The good news is that we start before Labor Day, and this year Labor Day was as early as it could be. Now, we were originally going to get out of school on June 12th if we had no snow days.
13th.
June 12th would have been the last day of school, I stand corrected. Instead, the last day of school will be the 24th, which only leaves 4 more days between our last day of school and the end of the school year. We need to end on June 30th. I was a little concerned we were going to have a snow day today, as a matter of fact. You sort of heard the forecast was a little shaky. We're not sure about tomorrow and Thursday it's supposed to snow.
Don't even count under 6 inches anymore.
Well, actually, it's funny. I talked to one of the highway superintendents and said, you know, if today's snowstorm had happened in November, we all would have been panicked and might have canceled school. And this was just 4 inches. What the heck? We're all coming to school, not a problem. Nonetheless, we have some decisions here to make. We can't go beyond June 30th, so we only have 4 days left. I don't ever want to cancel April vacation. Did I say ever? I don't ever want to cancel April vacation without a lot of discussion and let people know about that in advance. So I really have 2 choices if I need more than 4 days. One is I can run school on Saturday. I'm concerned about doing that because if I don't get enough attendance, it doesn't count. And that could be a problem. What I am going to ask you people to do is give me permission to modify the schedule to run it on Good Friday. Now that is a problem. It's a problem because I'm sure some people have plans, and it also falls within the Jewish holidays. Now, it would not be my intention to do it, and it takes me a month to get through all the school committees. Right now, Silver Lake has voted for it, Clinton has voted for it. And if by the time I get through you, if you'll vote for it, and Kingston, I will be at a point where I can't imagine using it because I now will be well into the middle of March. But having said that, it is sort of a last resort, but it may be a last resort that is needed to get through.
Why Good Friday and not a vacation day in April?
A vacation day in April is very disruptive for people. An awful lot of people plan to go away, and that becomes very difficult to get people to make that change.
Would you only have to make this decision if we had 4 more snow days between now and Good Friday?
Frankly, if we had a couple of 2 more snow days between now and Good Friday, I'd feel pretty comfortable because now I'm in April. But if I get a couple of more snow days this week or next week, I'm going to be very concerned and start to talk about that publicly.
I'm looking at the next 10 days on the weather. Something may happen on Thursday, but it's going to rain like the dickens on Wednesday.
Assuming the forecast is accurate.
Yeah. And then other than that, we're looking at a warming trend, except for the 11th, which is a 50-50 of snow.
I'm a little apprehensive.
What was the day that gives you the 180?
June 24th.
I don't want to get hit by lightning or anything, but
Again, it would be my hope not to have to use it, but the concern is we need to get 180 days in. I think it's unlikely the commissioner is going to grant a waiver at this point in time. His suggestion would be take Good Friday, take April vacation, and then you can do Saturday classes.
and you were saying if you had a mutiny on Good Friday, if we had to use it, it still wouldn't even count? What are the figures that you, percentage-wise?
I'd have to go look that up. I don't have that information with me.
But if you had 80% attendance, it could be a problem?
I think more than 80% would be fine. I'm not sure the exact number.
Okay.
It's somewhere right around there, though.
Why is everyone looking at me?
I realize I'm just one voice, but out of respect for people's religious beliefs, I do not support school on Good Friday. But that's just one person's opinion.
I'm kind of leaning that way
I'm
myself.
also leaning that way.
I'm already on public record that I didn't support this at Silver Lake, so I'm not changing my mind here.
You did not support it, so.
No, I did not.
Oh, then I don't think we're gonna have a majority.
You have-
I don't know, I don't
you
want to
have a
speak
hand
for you,
raised?
but for the majority of the body, I feel like I'm gonna get struck by lightning.
Linda Joshua, my son Ethan comes here. I own a dance studio, and I've had the same issues with canceling. And I had a makeup class on February vacation, attendance, Saturday I'm open anyway, but I think you're gonna get a lot of the usual soccer or whatever. Good Friday I'm open, I have great attendance. So when do people go to church on Good Friday? I don't know.
As a very Catholic mom, I think you should vote for it. You might never use it if you vote for it, so. And I'm a big Catholic, so.
If he has a sense of humor.
It's gonna have to be one.
I went to a political breakfast on Saturday, and the chaplain happened to be a personal friend. So I put the arm on him and I said, I want a prayer for warm weather in 24 hours. And he turns to me and he says, yes, General, if you know what I'm referring to.
So if Silver Lake was a yes, Plimpton was a yes, Kingston, we don't know, potentially could, hypothetically, let's say it's a yes, what happens in Halifax? It doesn't matter how we vote, we're outnumbered anyway, or it will Halifax
No, you-
not have school,
You
but
control your calendar.
Yes.
That's a
It
great
is
question.
a school committee decision.
I just had a quick question from just representation of the staff. So if staff wanted to, had plans, or they were recognizing the holiday for religious reasons, or they had plans to travel on that day, how would staff be treated in terms of not being here on that day, in terms of personal days, sick days, or, the intent was it was a day off?
There goes that sub-budget.
Well,
more TAs in the kindergarten classroom.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, it becomes a work day. As much as if I need to run classes on a Saturday because of the requirement for 180 days, and we're open, I expect that staff will show up on a Saturday if that's when we have to run classes.
So
We run classes on the 25th and 26th. If we run classes on June 29th and June 30th, I expect the staff will be there. Now, I think as we get closer towards the end of the school year, it gets harder for families to make accommodations. I think it gets harder for staff to make accommodations because now we're running into the time of the year where, in fact, we may have other vacation plans scheduled.
So in the event a staff member wasn't here for that day and they had plans to go somewhere, or they just didn't, they want to observe the holiday, they would be not paid for that day, or they would be charged a personal day, a sick day? How would that work?
If you had a personal day, we could certainly talk about it. Having said, if you had a personal day, we could talk about it.
I've read in other school districts, I don't know if this is the forum for it, but they actually have like packets that students can complete that would equal a school day.
So the town of Burlington, in an experimental program with the state, it's tried to put together, it's called a Blizzard package, where people would have to use it and work with it, and have that count as instructional day. It's done actually in New Hampshire and Maine, but they are sort of used to dealing with more snow than we do. So that may or may not be something that happens. But again, 12 years, consider this year 13, and this is the first time we've run into this.
I have to honestly say, as a parent, I wouldn't mind having work for my kids to do when they're at home.
I understand.
How many chores can you do? And you're stuck in the house,
Yes.
and I just think it solves so many problems.
Sure.
And everyone has access to their teacher's classroom through the technology. The teachers can do assignments and everything.
Now, right now, that certainly can be done as enrichment, but not in place of an instructional day.
So that program is still,
There were
It's
two
not-
school districts, Burlington is one, I can't remember
Okay.
the other one. That was
so it's
given
not
permission
something
to
we're
try.
allowed to do yet?
It is not something you are allowed to do yet.
Jimmy the Greek is no longer with us, so we can't consult with him.
All right, so I guess we need to make a decision here.
Does anyone want to make a motion?
Is there a motion to allow the superintendent the discretion to use Good Friday as a possible makeup day for a snow day?
We should move it so we can have the vote, so I'll move it.
Okay, is there a second?
I agree on the same principle Mr. Johnson has.
Okay, so you gonna second it?
I will second it.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this matter? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? All right, well, you have 4 noes and an abstention.
Very good.
All right,
I'm not going to ask you to vote on this tonight, but I want to give you a preview of the calendar for next year. Because we're already getting phone calls that say, so when's the first day of school? In fact, it came up here tonight. So following the practice that we've had for some time, school next year will start as late as it possibly can because of the way Labor Day falls. The first day of school for students would be September 2nd, which is a Wednesday. Labor Day is the 7th, which is the first Monday. A couple of things. We would expect to have an in-service day for teachers on the 13th, which is the day after Columbus Day, giving everybody a 4-day weekend. We switched that around to November when we have an election, or a year with a big election. Christmas holiday would start on the 24th, which is a Thursday, and go through the rest of that week, Thursday, Friday, and all of the next week. We come back to school on Monday the 4th, and Silver Lake graduation would be Saturday the 4th, of June, sort of some of the big highlights. And the last day of school, assuming that we have no snow days or any other reason to cancel school, would be June 16th. Now, there's still some other things to be worked out in here, and we'll try to get that all filled up by the time we come back again next month and ask you to vote on it. But this is the broad outline of the calendar for next year. And yes, it assumes that Good Friday will be a day that we do not have school.
Looks like we have 10 full days after the 16th to play with next year.
That's nothing's ordered, don't worry.
So John, just out of curiosity, why can't we start school in August?
Every labor contract that we have with teachers says the first day of school will be the last Monday of August.
Okay. So we can look this over and ponder it, and you want
Look at it and ponder it.
to think about it for next,
Yep.
okay.
Completely dips.
Any questions? All right.
So, monthly financial statement, Christine?
I'm here once again with our lovely yellow sheets of financial information. We're 2/3 of the way through the school year, and there are very few areas of chaos. This does not reflect the full impact of the snow, removal, or otherwise moving it around. So that's not, we do not yet know the full impact of that. As of right now, the areas of concern are in the special education area. In our tuition account, again, we're expecting a deficit of approximately $50,000. The deficit you see in the financial is higher because we have not applied the rest of the circuit breaker funds that have not yet come in. Once those come in, we will be applying that. Also in that area is the contract services account, where we are expecting a deficit of $47,000.
We had talked about that previously, that's one of the areas that's no longer covered by a grant. Grant was to be able to cover much of those costs. There was another deficit in that area, the psychological supplies and materials. Those are the tested materials that were needed, and they ended up costing a little bit more than what we expected. And then again, on the very last page of the financial, the other district vocational account, there is a surplus of $101,000. The town recently used some money from that account. I have not received yet final confirmation what that final amount was. I believe it was in the $20,000. 27? And we would like to use that to offset the out-of-district special education tuition costs that are running a deficit right now. In that out-of-district vocational account, we talked before, we had budget for 5 students. Only 2 ended up going to the programs this year. Of those 2, 1 is graduating, so we do have one of them that we're returning for next year. And they're both attending Norfolk County Agricultural. Any questions?
Under school committee, we have a new deficit,
A new one?
a new one.
That is the salary clerical account, you are
Yes.
correct. That is the account we talked about, we'll increase the budget for next
Yeah.
year because we are going those funds at a greater pace than we have in the past. And right now, the deficit is $23.70. And as we found out last meeting, the records are submitted quite timely, so this is fairly up to date.
Okay.
As up to date as the last payroll.
Are there any other questions on it? No? Okay. Now we get to talk about the 2015 and 2016 budget.
This is a new budget that you're seeing. We've made some adjustments that we are aware of. We made adjustments for that additional retirement that we have. Well, there's been some fine tuning on some requests for equipment and also in some technology. And I've also attached a new technology list to show why there have been changes.
All right, could we review the changes that are in here? I understand that we talked about a lot of them last week at the meeting, but I think reviewing them for the audience would not be a bad idea.
Sure. The first thing we reduced was the workshop account for professional development. We had talked about that, and we were going with the funds of the kids we had expected for this year. So we have reduced the workshop account by $2,500.
Okay.
The next thing we did was we had talked about the media person. We have put in a .5 person for next year, hoping that we can combine that with the town. But we also had left the funds that we had in there previously for somebody who would come in and help us out. We have reduced the budget by that $4,185, the amount of the person that would come in to help us out. If in the event that the position does not pass, we have to recover some of those funds to get the school through the year.
But we could reduce this line item then to the 41.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Correct. Under the equipment accounts, we've eliminated the carpet for the front office and the lobby and the cafeteria tables. And then under the technology area, I've made a note where there's been some switching around of the items that would be used under the town's technology article. And then we also have a REAP grant, but this is the second year of the REAP grant. We're able to purchase some technology, so there's some items on that we've been able to move to the REAP grant for next year. And in addition, there have also been some updates. Our technology director went through the list to see if there's any fine tuning he could do, and he was able to make a few modifications, and I did note those on that spreadsheet. We've accounted for the additional retirement that we received and a replacement for that person. We've accounted for that. And we've accounted in the out-of-district vocational area. I mentioned we have 1 student returning. We have had 1 new student apply for next year, and we put in a placeholder for 1 more student. So we have a total of 3 students accounted for in the change that you see on the cover sheet of the budget. And then we also did reduce the maintenance of building area by $6,000. There were some questions about that last month. We were including air conditioning for the computer room. And I realized that during the budget, we had already taken that out. But we did review what's been happening this year to date and last year to date. So we made a reduction of $6,000 in that account. And after all those changes are done, you see what the new budget looks like.
Do you have a figure for the difference between this, the one we looked at and the new one? The total difference?
I do not, but I can figure that out.
If you could figure out the percentage difference as well as the overall amount, that would be helpful.
Well, let's see, we went from,
We went from 4.33% to 2.78% for total without adequate expense. And if you look at the math quickly, it's approximately $78,000 reductions.
That's total reductions
Yes.
in all line items.
And then the out-of-district vocational would be an extra $54,000 reduced. We heard the town loud and clear, and we sharpened our pencils and went through from all the efforts the other evening that we had gone through and really looked very closely and feel this is really quite a reasonable budget at this point in time in terms of our numbers. In terms of the REAP grant, just so everyone knows, that is a federal grant. To my knowledge, federal grants are not being touched. I know there's some concern about state grants, but we've received no notice on federal grants. I can't guarantee we will get that grant. Last year was the first year we were eligible. One of the criteria is the size of the school, and as long as Halifax stays under 600, and as long as we stay within a certain socioeconomic number, which I don't know how they figured out, to be honest with you, but they have a formula that they seem to understand, and I can't believe that we've changed that dramatically. I believe we will get that grant, but I can't guarantee it. But either way, what the numbers that we have down for the technology article are not inclusive of things that we would very much love to have, are appropriate for our students, but that we understand what the town is saying in terms of the concerns they're having financially. So hopefully the REAP grant will come through and we'll still be able to make those purchases.
To the REAP grants for technology specifically?
It's a grant that is difficult in terms of how to use it. What we found, and in my conversations with the person who gives us the grant, the most common use is for technology that supports academic learning, because that is often the smaller schools don't have the funding for that. So that's the most common use of the grant. I had sent you the links before for the information. It's an unusual grant, but the types of technology that would be very beneficial for this school and that are difficult to fund are ones that would really make sense. You know, we look towards the Chromebooks, we look towards the carts, the projectors for the kindergarten classroom, items like that that would be difficult for us to fund.
Can I ask Mrs. Roy a question? I know the Finance Committee didn't meet tonight, but I don't know between our last discussion and this one if there's any more talk about the media tech.
Yes.
Okay.
We did talk about it a week ago when the Board of Selectmen met with the Finance Committee. Again, it's a priority for the town because we've lost some valuable data and we really recognize that we're not running as efficiently as we should be without some kind of expert. And this is the most cost-effective way of doing it instead of hiring an outside company. So as it stands right now, as much as we can hold on to it, we're going to.
Okay.
Depending on what happens to that deficit, obviously we're going to have to make tough choices. But at this point, we'd like to be able to hang on to that position.
Okay.
John, did you mention that the governor's budget is expected tomorrow?
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
I mean, I would like to make a general statement that I did hear the governor say that he is going to persuade early retirement in the state, and if not, he's prepared to hand out 4,500 pink slips to close the $1.5 million budget, or billion-dollar budget deficit in the state. That being said, I'm not too optimistic about what kind of local aid we're gonna see coming down the pike, and I do believe that this is a reasonable budget, but I don't think we've gone far enough. That's just my opinion.
What would be your suggestion?
I don't know, I mean, I honestly don't know if we can fund this budget as it sits right here. I don't think it's gonna get through the finance committee, to be honest with you. And I'm not sure, I don't have the answer, but
And see, and this is where I'm struggling, okay? Because the directive that we got from the town, okay, and I think we've moved towards that. But nobody's telling us exactly where we have to be. This is where.
We don't really have representation from the finance committee, but I can tell you again what the memo that Charlie had sent out is. And again, I couldn't come to your meeting, the budget meeting. I had another meeting to be at. So I don't know. I know that Christine went through it, but the directive was to have the things that you know you cannot change. Steps and lanes, increases in utilities. And as I said to Casey earlier on the phone today, you know, I know you lost a grant, and so that's certainly something you can't do anything about. So I would suggest at this point that you keep whatever increase you need for that grant to try to maintain that service as much as you can. Like outside of anything like of those things, those are the things that you would need to reduce. And so if you feel pretty confident that you've already done that there's nothing else in there outside of those, then that's the number that I would suggest that we plug into the overall picture of the town. And once we start seeing these budgets coming in with the directive that we've asked, which is that these are to all the departments, that then we'll see how far we've eaten away at that deficit. And then hopefully we don't have to come back to you. You know, but if we do, then you'll know, we can show you on paper this is exactly where we are, and there's no question of what we need to do. So do you feel confident that you only have those sorts of things in your budget right now? Is the only question I would ask you.
I just feel more confident before voting on this to know the exact numbers coming from the governor and state aid.
Yeah, and again, as you know, it's the first draft. We like to think it's the floor of the budget, and certainly when it comes to minimum contribution, John knows it's been changed later on in the season, but it's, I think it will give us a clear message, and I think that Summer is right on key when she said that she's not overly optimistic about the state aid. I do have a meeting tomorrow at the State House. Maybe I'll get a little glimmer, but it's only a day earlier than what everybody else would, but I think that we're looking at probably being happy if we can level fund. And the other things that we have also that affect our budget is we have increased costs for veteran services, and that's something that people don't really talk about. Like we spent a fair amount of time talking about SPED and the obligation that we have to the special ed students, but we also have our obligation to veterans, and so we have veterans benefits that work very similar to the way that SPED works, where the year that you were in, you don't get the reimbursement that year, you have to wait the other year. So those are other things that we're watching that could also affect the deficit that we had talked about last week. We have some new numbers on that, so.
I mean, personally, I'd like to take the textbook line is a little concerning to me.
What line item are you referring to specifically?
It's 2,400 on the front, but if you open it up, it starts at 170. I mean, it doesn't seem. I need to. I guess I have a little bit of a concern when I asked about it the budget meeting. And I was told that a large portion of this are consumables, like throwing away the worksheets that the kids tear out of the workbook. And I wonder, like, what did we do before we had all these Go Math and all these Envision whatever worksheets, you know, like did the kids have textbooks in the classrooms? Did we print things off of the computer? You know, was the majority of the work done in the classroom? You know, are these, some of these workbooks absolutely necessary? You know, things like that.
Children do need pencil and paper practice.
I'm all for it, absolutely. I mean, you heard my whole spiel about the technology thing. I'd rather them have a pencil than a laptop, personally. But
And they have had practice workbooks in the past. But with costs rising and everything, it's becoming more and more expensive to replace those workbooks. And the consumables, again, are quite costly. But again, the children in those grade levels do need those pencil and paper practices, whereas in the upper grades, they have a hardcover book and they can transfer that information onto a separate piece of paper.
so does each grade only have one workbook that they use? It's not like they have two and one can be sacrificed?
No, it depends on the subject area. So in the early grades, they may have one for mathematics, they may have one for reading as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so they don't have two math workbooks?
No.
It's also inclusive of some money for the new science program, which is yet to be determined, as we've talked about. You know, we are looking at different programs. There's 3 or 4 companies out there right now that have the new programs. Our hope is that we can do a pilot next year to have the teachers really look at the programs. If we can get some free samples, which are harder and harder to get, the companies just don't give them out like they used to. It used to be very easy to get companies when you're interested in buying one. They give you samples because they wanted to wow you. But we will manipulate to the best of our ability to get as much free stuff as we can from the companies to look at them and then hopefully to make a decision by the end of the year. We're looking at some different iterations. We are a school. Textbooks are what we need.
Yeah, well, of course.
So it is something that can we shave a little bit off? If that's the will of the committee, certainly we can look at and do that. But again, there's a number in there for consumable textbooks. There's a number in there for science. Last year it was at $41,000. This year it's at $60,000. The year before that it was $63,000. I mean, it's a little bit up and down depending on what we're purchasing. But in the younger grades, they are consumable, and there really isn't a way around that. If we don't purchase the books and we just copy the worksheets, then we kill the copiers and we use
And paper, yeah.
So I'm not sure what the end around is.
Do you know offhand what the allotted amount we set aside for the science?
Well, there's a range depending on what we decide. If we were to just look at, I actually put together some things. One program for Halifax for the number of students we have, if we just looked at implementing grades 3 through 6, you know, because of the budget situation, it would be $23,191. And it would be inclusive of teacher resources, and it would be a 7-year student subscriptions. What the companies are doing now, and like for instance with GoMath for 4th and 5th grade, is we get a consumable book every year, but when you buy it with a 6-year subscription. So it isn't a cost every year. So you pay it once, and then as they update it, you get a new book every year. It's a much more economical way of doing it with these newer programs. So that would be one program, one expense.
Can I ask a question about line item 206, the .5 new media tech? How much time do you expect that individual will be working on behalf of the school rather than the town? And how necessary do you think that position is as far as the school side goes?
Well, we expect that they'd be here 20 hours a week, half-time. And if you would talk to Steve Fellow, he'd tell you it's a necessary item. I mean, we have, technology has become ubiquitous throughout the school. And as we put more of it in the building, it's necessary to have somebody who's going to keep it up.
I just wanted to hear that it was going to be an even time split between us and the town.
That is the plan.
I mean, I'm sure there will be a time if there's a crisis.
No, I understand, but in general, it's not going to be that the town gets 30 hours and we get 10 and we're splitting the cost. I just
Unless they're
wanted-
having a really bad week.
Understood.
Got a question. So I attended the Silver Lake School Committee meeting where the budget was discussed, and a representative from the town of Plimpton discussed that Plimpton is looking at a cut, a 2% cut, I think, which could, and I think his caution or statement to the committee was that the committee may need to look at layoffs to accommodate that 2% cut that Plimpton's looking to make. Is that where we're at in Halifax? And I address that to anyone in the room that wants to answer it. Are we looking at that?
Mrs. Roy, go ahead.
Okay, we're going to do everything that we can to avoid something like that, because we don't want that at all. We want to be able to maintain the services and education and the services in other departments. And the other thing that we need to be mindful for is that, you know, it's not always a cost savings right away when you lay somebody off. That typically, John, you can correct me, for every 2 people you lay off a third person to pay.
The rule of thumb with teachers is for every 2 teachers that you lay off, you have to lay off a third to pay for the unemployment costs associated with the first 2 and the third.
So I think that's important to be on camera.
Yeah, so we are doing, like, and again, I don't want to, I'm trying really hard this year not to be chicken little, that the sky's falling without really knowing if it is. So we're really working the numbers and really making sure of the numbers before, and you know, we don't have a long period of time before town meeting when you need to vote your budgets, but we don't certainly want to start down that path if it's unnecessary, because it's a very emotional, awful thing. So, you know, that's why we really are asking everybody to look at their budgets and say, tell us the bottom line. Like, can you get away with not doing it this year? And, you know, then we'll have a true number of what we're looking at. This certainly helps. We're still in a deficit, but it's certainly we're going in the right direction.
Thanks.
Like April 1st would be.
So our next committee meeting is not until,
We meet again on April
6th.
6th.
Okay, I know that's your next scheduled meeting, and depending on, you know, this will go to the finance committee, you know, and we're gonna get all the budgets in, but there may be a point where we ask you to have another meeting in between your April meeting to sort of look at this budget. So I don't know if we can.
All right, so since we're all sitting here, it's easier to say while we're in the room, when are people available? We can always cancel a meeting if we don't need it, but trying to schedule one.
So I'm out of town from the 18th to the 28th of March. So that leaves Monday the 30th and Tuesday the 31st for me
Monday the 30th works for
of
me.
March.
Yes, Monday. You will be back by Monday.
I'll be back that Saturday.
Does
So-
that work for administration, that Monday? I know you, that's one of the, no?
Not me, but
You're here? Christine, are you here?
What was the date?
March 30th?
I can make it work.
Okay. Can the committee make it work? Yes, 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 yes? Okay, so what time do you want to meet?
Actually,
Okay.
what time are we going to meet?
What time do you need us to meet?
Actually, 7 o'clock would be fine.
7 would be
7
better
o'clock?
for me.
Okay.
And that's tentative.
10.
Well, let's make it that we have a meeting, and if we can cancel it, we can cancel it.
Understood.
But
3:30,
3:30, yeah. 7 p.m.
15, and 7.
Could I ask you to do another tentative date? Sorry.
Another what?
Tentative date, only because it's only a week earlier than when you would have met. So let's say we start getting budgets in and the finance committee has quorum, because that's another issue that we've been facing with quorum and not being able to get the work done because of that. But If for some reason, mid-March, before you leave, we needed to come to you and say, okay, we've got the budgets in, let's start working it. Do you want to, no, that would be too early.
I'm looking at, I mean, if she's gonna be away the 18th,
Huge amount.
if she's gonna be away from the 18th on,
I'm not sure that gives us enough
That's
time.
fine, that's fine.
That's a personal
No,
opinion.
that's
Unless you guys, do you need me?
Yeah.
It'd be helpful to have
Yeah.
the full board here.
it would be, it's nice to have the full committee make a budget.
Yeah,
Especially where
I
it's
appreciate
the
that.
budget.
And
Yeah.
especially if
It's
somebody
budget.
else can't make it.
Yeah, no,
Short
that's fine.
short notice.
That's fine. It's just, I was just thinking that there's such a large portion of our overall budget that, but that's fine. We can
Is the FinCom meeting Monday?
They're scheduled to meet this Wednesday.
When?
This coming Wednesday, they're meeting, I believe, with the water department
Okay.
budget. They've done public safety, all of the public safety is complete.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kim, I realize that Mr. Andrews isn't here, and you certainly can't necessarily speak for the FinCom, but do you think it's possible that the FinCom can just look at this proposed budget, and if they want to make cuts, they can make suggestions?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So that would be what would happen. Like, so what we would look at this and, you know, depending on what it does to the bottom line, and again, we still haven't received the Silver Lake budget, which again is a large portion as well. So, you know, we can look at it and then they can always, like the liaison, I think, is it Gordon? Gordon's the official liaison to the school committee. He could reach out to administration and just say, hey, this is where it looks, so, you know.
But I'd like us to be part of that
Sure,
loop also.
Sure. But you can't really do that unless you have a meeting.
No, I understand that, but I mean, it would be maybe
Or
helpful.
you could maybe come to, I think it would be appropriate for maybe the finance committee could make an appointment with the school committee.
And Gordon and I talked a little bit about that, and I think he's looking at maybe the 16th.
Oh, so
I'm
that would
not
be
sure.
perfect. That's what I mean, like-
But since I haven't gotten anything official, it's kind of hard to bring it up here.
Yeah, no, so let's say it could be the 16th. It would be before summer's away. And it would just be another quick conversation to say, hey, this is where, a quick update for you all, to say this is where we are, so that we know what, if there's more work to do, if there isn't, that would be great.
Are you talking about a joint meeting, or are you talking about us
No,
attending
just
the
say it's
FinCom?
an appointment. So what happens is the finance committee typically will meet with department heads. So as I said earlier, we've already met with all the 3 departments that are involved with public safety. On Wednesday, they're meeting with the water department to talk about not only their current budget, but we're also going out to bid to paint the water tower, which is a huge project. So that's something we're working on. And then, you know, we can get, you know, another department in next Monday, maybe perhaps highway, you know, and then on the 16th, maybe the school would be great. So we just have everybody come into the finance committee so you can talk to the finance committee members and they can give you, you know, sort of the state of the nation.
Normally, it's whoever can make it from the committee.
Yeah.
Right, so it's not this isn't a formal meeting of this body?
No,
No.
we wouldn't expect you to make any decisions.
Right.
You know, it's a conversation.
It's not a
Especially 'cause
posted
we run-
meeting for
That's
us, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's,
Could we have a quorum there
You
if we
could
don't?
post it, you could post it on that day, just in case you have a quorum.
need a
It's okay if
48-hour
you
posting
meet up as
with
long as
open
you're not
meeting law.
making
We have to
decisions.
post it 48 hours before.
And what I'm saying is, if your appointment is on the 16th, I'm just
Right.
using that as a date, you could tentatively schedule a meeting so that quorum is, if quorum shows up, quorum shows up. I don't think that they would ask you to vote a budget, because I think that needs to be. at
That needs to be
public
here.
meetings. But you can at least have dialogue amongst yourself, and it's a public meeting, anybody could go because it's a posted meeting. So the Board of Selectmen tends to do that. If we know we're going to kind of randomly be somewhere, we'll post a meeting. It's okay, though, if we don't know somebody else is coming, we just don't
So
deliver.
we deliberate amongst
Exactly, and
ourselves.
that's
Yeah,
where it gets a little tricky.
yeah.
But until I have a firm date,
Yeah. So sometimes if I bump into Troy, you'll see me running away from him.
all right, so that's it for the open session anyway. Is there a motion to go into executive sessions for the purposes of negotiations? And I heard that I need to be a little bit more specific, so with the Halifax Teachers, for the Halifax Teachers Association, only to return to open session to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second, roll call,
Abstain.
you need to make an announcement.
I need to remove myself from this discussion on account of an internal conflict of interest involving myself and my employer.
Okay, so,
Aye.
Aye.
aye. Thank you, everybody, for coming out this evening.